Hello, this is your host for tonight. My name is Albert, and this is Lucas and Oliver, and we're here to discuss the importance of the Iraqi war. During this podcast, we will, on basis of the two articles, Whose War by John Whiteman and an article published in Boston Globe by Jeff Jacoby, cover the outcome of the war and ask ourselves, was it all worth it? But first, let's briefly sum up the war. The war was started by the United States in 2003, officially with the purpose of removing weapons of mass destructions. Those are the very discussed WMDs from Iraq. The war was not authorized or backed by any of the international organizations, those such as the UN or NATO, but it was initialized by an independent group of countries. Some of them, besides the United States, was England and Japan. But was it all worth it?
Well, first off, we can look at this article written by Jeff Jacoby in the Boston Globe. He uses a survey from a newspaper to emphasize the amount of people in favor, and to support this, he also refers to two other major survey companies like Gallup and Pew Research Center, who all showed a huge acceptance of entering Iraq. It was up to 70%. Jacoby justifies that it was not only Republicans who was pro the Iraq War, but also Democrats by referring to known Democratic political contesters like John Kerry, Hillary Clinton, and John Biden. And even though major Democrats was pro the war in the beginning, they bashed the Republicans for the Iraqi war. It was too irresistible for them to pass up an opportunity like this. When the USA entered Iraq, they ensured that the mass murderer Saddam Hussein's reign was ended and that his sons could not become the rulers of Iraq. The war in Iraq showed other dictators that acquiring WMDs would result in an intervention which inspired other dictators to get rid of their weapons of mass destruction. The first few arguments was well.
Yeah, and if we look at the article Whose War by John Edgar Whiteman from Harper's Magazine, it's quite anti-Bush and anti-Iraq war. John Edgar Whiteman describes Bush as a first-term, skin-of-its-teeth president. In the first half of the article, Whiteman juxtapositions living in the ghetto and the mutual feeling you get when you live close to people who share the same problems as you, and meaning racism in this case, with the feelings the Americans shared after the attack on the World Trade Centers. He describes terror as the problem, enemy, and as the excuse for unleashing the darkness within ourselves. He sees the use of the discourse terrorist as a refusal of dialogue, a way to with just the discourse make it clear that they are the wrongdoers and not us. In the final part of the article, Whiteman describes Bush in a negative way. He thinks that Bush terrorized the American people into believing that they needed a wartime president, and that Bush only appeals to patriotism to serve himself. He ends the article with a quote describing the Americans' fear of terror. If a child's afraid of the dark, do we solve the problems by buying her a gun? And I don't even really believe that the Iraqi war was justified. It was even later revealed that the excuse of removing WMDs was not even true because the weapons had already been destroyed.
The thing is, the US Agency of Intelligence, the CIA, was not even informed that the WMDs was destroyed, and the Iraqi government kept it a secret to not look weak.
But as we have seen in newer times, USA doesn't exactly have a weak intelligence department. I'm sure that they could have obtained the information easily if they cared, or maybe they did obtain it and just ignored it.
Maybe. Or maybe something had to be done against tyrannies that commit homicide against their own people with WMDs. We can also see a positive effect since the intervention. It inspired other dictators to get rid of their WMDs, and it inspired the Middle East people to fight for their own freedom.
But it also created a lot of corruption in the gap that was left after Saddam Hussein was killed. There's also been reports of torture by the Iraqi security forces trained by Western forces, our forces. I agree that something had to be done, but why do it with weapons when we could do it with words?
Because doing it with words isn't effective enough. A political pressure by UN does not achieve anything if the dictator has an iron grip on the society. In example, Myanmar. The Western forces had to prioritize whether to intervene when they saw torture or to ensure safety and report the torture. I believe the last thing is the preferable. And lastly, The reason why corruption is so pervasive is because a forced extraction from Iraq.
So, in conclusion, we can see that there are many different opinions on the Iraqi war and whether there was a legit reason to enter Iraq or not. We believe that there is not one single right answer, it's only a matter of different opinions.